Hello, it looks like we have people tuning in to our podcast, Leveraging Your Emotional Social Intelligence for Growth. We welcome you all this evening. What we're going to do is just take a few more minutes and allow everybody to kind of roll in here before we go ahead and kick off. So it's at the tip of the hour, and I know we gave it just a couple seconds, but it's 5, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and thank you for your continued support. Joining our podcast, Leveraging Your Emotional Social Intelligence for Growth. Last month, we focused on the decision-making composite and its subcategories, which include problem solving, reality testing, and impulse control. And a reminder about tackling problems for the problem-solving component in the decision-making composite is that to always be grounded in your reality and make sure that you're not letting your past influences affect your current decision-making so that you are able to control your emotions and make more informed decisions. So, this week, we are focusing on stress management. This is vital to our overall happiness and creating a good culture. But before we begin, let's do a quick round of introductions of our panelists, and I'll go ahead and start us off. My name is Tyson Werner, and I provide the EQI 2.0 assessment to early careers and senior executives to identify their strengths and work on areas of improvement for their personal and professional growth. This helps create a positive environment for their direct reports, their peers, and senior leadership. I own Evolutionary Talent and partner with Catherine and My Higher Roads, where we provide services to create a stunning resume and prepare individuals for new careers or a transition within their career. That is a little bit about myself and how I use the EQI 2.0 assessment. Let's learn how Cinzia uses the assessment next.
Thanks, Tyson. Hello, everybody. I'm Cinzia. I'm a global leader in a multinational company, and I have a dual role. I work on culture and employee engagement, but I also work on leadership development. I'm responsible for some growth programs, and I'm also a coach. And I use mainly EQ in the leadership development area and as a coach. So that's where I apply it mainly. Kathysue, you want to share something about yourself?
Sure. Thanks so much. And I just wanted to thank everybody who's with us today and who's followed our last 5 podcasts. When working with trauma survivors, I use the EQI to assess their stress levels when dealing with difficult situations and have been using the EQI for over 12 years now. Managing our stress is another key component of emotionally regulating ourselves. And with that, I'll turn it back to Tyson and he'll begin our discussion.
Yes, so a reminder, if you guys have any questions at any point in time, please just raise your hand or use a little reaction to do the hand raising icon, and we will pull you off mute so that you can ask. We look forward to it being very interactive. So a quick overview, because as Kathysue mentioned, this is our 6th podcast, but there are the main components of the EQI 2.0 assessment. And the first was self-perception. The second was self-expression. The third, interpersonal. And the fourth, decision-making. And as we mentioned earlier, the 5th, which we're focusing on tonight, is stress management. Each composite has 3 subcategories. And today, as we focus on the stress management category, I want to begin by listing the 3 subscales, and their definitions so that we're all on the same page. The first one is flexibility, which is adapting your emotions, thoughts, and behaviors to unfamiliar, unpredictable, and dynamic circumstances or ideas. The second one, stress tolerance, is involving coping with stressful or difficult situations and believing that one can manage or influence situations in a positive manner. The third, optimism, is an indicator of one's positive attitude and outlook on life. It involves remaining hopeful and resilient despite occasional setbacks. So, I'm going to take a quick second and pause after we did those definitions. Do we have any questions? Okay, so let us begin by learning from Kathysue how optimism is critical to our emotional, social well-being, and communication.
Oh, thanks, Tyson. As he mentioned in our introductory portion of this podcast, optimism is a person's ability to remain hopeful and resilient, even in the midst of adversity or even occasional setbacks. It's basically a person's positive outlook on life. Many may wonder how optimism influences their stress levels or how optimism plays into our overall EQ. Understanding how optimism fuels or motivates you through a stressful situation is an important factor when regulating your emotional social self. For instance, if you have a low score in optimism, you're generally pessimistic and unhappy. You probably give up or give in too easily and have a self defeating attitude toward life. You may feel helpless or hopeless, and people around you, like family, friends, and coworkers, may say that you're never happy, you never smile or laugh, and seem to lack motivation to better yourself. And you may not feel successful in your personal and professional objectives. On the other spectrum, if you have a high score in optimism, you're consistently positive and happy despite negative circumstances and adverse situations. People like to be around you and consider you to be enthusiastic and happy. Your optimism fuels your positive outlook in life. For those people who score in the mid-range of optimism, your level of positivity depends on the situation you're experiencing. You might be optimistic in your career, yet pessimistic about a personal relationship. Interestingly, most people do score within this mid-range of 90 to 110, and it does not mean that there's a problem. It just means that you can improve upon your level of optimism. One strategy to do this includes telling yourself that things will work out and that success may look different than originally thought. Another strategy that may help if you're feeling sad and not excited about your future is to reach out to friends, family members, or coworkers who can offer you support and help you through a difficult situation. Oftentimes, when I'm not sure about the future, I remind myself that other similar situations had a way of working themselves out. Or I debrief a situation by asking myself questions like what was good about the situation, what worked, what didn't work, what could I have done differently, so that the next time a situation like that occurs, I'll be better prepared. Basically, I remember to praise myself for getting through a stressful situation and create strategies to use for the next time something like that happens, which helps me to stay confident and optimistic in my life. In reference to trauma, many of my clients suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, in which stress negatively fuels their healing journey. The better my clients are at regulating the stress, the greater sense of optimism and happiness they experience. And one of the subscales that helps a person better control their stress level is the ability to be flexible. So I'll stop there to check in with my colleagues to see if there are any questions from our listeners. And if not, I'll send it to Cinzia for her discussion on the EQ subscale of flexibility.
Thank you, Kathysue. I don't see any questions so far, so very interesting your part on optimism. So my focus will be on flexibility, and as Tyson mentioned at the very beginning, flexibility is our ability to adapt our emotion, our thoughts, our behaviors to what's happening to us, what's happening around us. So being able to adapt in a dynamic environment following the circumstances. Flexibility is very much connected with one of the areas we saw in the last podcast, which is problem solving. So with flexibility, we try to remain open to new approaches while we try to figure out how to solve problems. So the two elements are very important to keep them in balance. Otherwise, we tend to be too flexible and we maybe are not able to solve the problems or reach the goal that we have in mind, or we are not at all flexible, and we lose the opportunity to see as new or understand or have a new perspective to look at. One other interesting point to consider around flexibility is the connection with change management. So how we cope with change in the world today, in every company, in the world in general. This skill, the ability to manage change, the ability to cope with change, is always so much valued in. If you read online, when you get into a company, it's very rare to find companies that are fully stable and do not move or do not change. One important thing to consider is that our brain, from a neuroscience standpoint, is not designed in a way to accept change. Accepting change that does require energy, does require effort, and flexibility is something that comes handy when we have to face change, right? But again, going to the extreme, too flexible, we tend to lose sight of what are our needs. So with managing change, it's important to keep an eye on what we can control, which is our reaction to change. And flexibility can be a reaction to change, for example, being too flexible or being not at all flexible. In both cases, we have different reactions. Another point another interesting connection between flexibility and other EQ subskills is the independence. So the balance between being self-directed and self-driven and free from an emotional dependency on others when making decisions, so the independence, and the flexibility on the other side, so being too flexible, being too much dependent and influenced by others. So if you had the opportunity to listen to our different podcasts in this 6 months, you will see that every subskill is connected in one way or another to the others. And it's not a matter of being the best or having the highest score in a subscale. It's all about the balance between the different strengths that we have. So balance between flexibility and problem solving, balance between flexibility and independence, or like Kathysue was talking about, optimism, there it's connected with other subscales. So there is not one size fits all, is different scenarios. And I'll pause here if there is any question. And in the meantime, I'll anticipate that my colleague Tyson will cover stress tolerance. We don't have any question, looks like, so far.
Thank you, Cinzia. And well put about the combination and amalgamation of the depth and breadth of the EQI 2.0 assessment. So each category, which there's 5, has 3 subcategories in the overall EQ. So it does span into each category. Emotional social intelligence is not isolated from one emotion to the next, which is often why we have this feeling of confusion and being able to balance all these different emotions as they come into play. So for stress tolerance, it's the ability to tolerate stress, and it's crucial in our professional and personal lives. It involves being able to handle difficult or stressful situations and believing that you can influence them positively. A low stress tolerance can manifest itself in various ways, such as being anxious or stressed or agitated, procrastinating, or giving up too easily. If your stress tolerance is in the middle range, you can sometimes manage your stress well, but other times you struggle. And people in this range have the one-off moments where they succumb to their stress or fear and they let it get the best of them. Now, on the high end of stress tolerance, individuals have a wide range of tools and approaches to deal with stress. and they are confident in their ability to solve problems. However, it's important to remember that having a high stress tolerance also has its own downsides. For instance, you may be perceived as being ignorant or blind to stress or dangers, overconfident or conceited, or not interested in the outcomes or consequences. So, therefore, like Cinzia mentioned, you always aim to strike a balance between being able to handle stress efficiently and not being too complacent. In our discussion about stress tolerance, we have identified, the three levels: low, medium, and high. One common theme we have observed is the use of various techniques to improve stress tolerance. But what are those techniques, and how can we work to enhance our stress tolerance abilities? So, one of them is you can take some immediate actions, such as standing up when you recognize you're getting stressed or getting flustered, and stretching and moving around to release the tension, release your muscles, and let out some of that internal frustration or energy that you have. And you're doing it in a safe and healthy way, even when you're feeling anxious. Alternatively, you can pause and take a deep breath. And for a long term improvement, it's essential to remember that you are most able to tolerate stress when you're healthy, well rested, fit, and happy. So, making some of those life improvement and life changes will help you by eating well, exercising, and getting enough sleep, and staying connected with those who bring you joy and happiness. Some people describe this as your space or stealing your energy or giving you energy. And so, with that, stay around people who give you positive energy and positive vibes. Um, and also have those powerful tools in your back pocket that you know work for you to remain stress free. So, that ends my portion on stress tolerance, and I want to do a quick spot check now that Kathysue, Cinzia, and myself have all presented. And I wanted to see, do we have any questions or anybody who would like to share a moment of how they utilized one of the categories here throughout their daily work schedule or lives? And if not, that is okay. So we will take a question from our panelists to see what they have. Kathysue, do you have a question?
Yes, actually, I do for Cinzia. I was wondering what is the connection really between flexibility and impulse control?
Okay, that's a very good question. Before coming to this, though, I wanted to comment on something that you, Tyson, just said before about surrounding ourselves with positive energy. Going back to neuroscience, we have in our brain what we call mirror neurons. So those neurons that tends to repeat or copy the behaviors of others. That's why we say if you stay and you're surrounded by positive people, this vibes are also absorbed by you, just because there is let's say a basical science proof about this. So I just wanted to comment on that because this is just funny. The first time I heard about the mirror neurons, it was I thought, what is that? And it's the reality, right? When you say surround yourself with positive people, that's definitely help. And now, going back to your question, Kathysue, about the connection between flexibility and impulse control. These are impulse control. If you were with us in the last podcast, it's in the area of decision making. So it's the ability to resist an impulse or a temptation that involves avoiding rush behaviors or rush decision making. So if we are too flexible in our approach and we have a low level of impulse control, then we might make changes or we might make decisions without even pondering too much longer term. So that's a risk. And these are two areas that also have to be considered in balance um, for us to operate and work well. I would recommend a couple of questions that you can ask yourself when you find yourself in a situation where the flexibility or impulse control are involved. The first question is, what am I willing to give up or negotiate? And this goes with the flexibility. What am I willing to give up about this particular topic? If I'm too flexible, I will give up this, and this. Am I ready? Do I need to negotiate myself what I'm willing to give up? And regarding the impulse control, the other question that I would suggest for yourself to ask is, how is my action going to impact others? So this will give you time to breathe, because the main challenge of impulse is the fact that we don't have enough time to pause and think about this. So a simple question, how is my action going to impact others, can give you the room to literally stop, breathe, and think through something, and then take some action. So this is the generic distinction and connection between flexibility and impulse control. If we have any question from the audience, please feel free to raise your hand. And in the meantime, I'll ask a question to Tyson, myself, and how can stress tolerance impact the decision-making area?
Yeah, great question. And thank you for that answer. So, stress tolerance will impact the decision making area in numerous ways. But one of the prevalent things that must stay to the forefront is always associating yourself with the reality of a situation. And that's typically easier said than done, especially if you're in a heightened emotional state. Um, Earlier, I know we touched on ensuring that you're not letting your past decisions or unknown biases kind of influence that decision making process. So, when you're at a heightened emotion and upset and angry, you typically try to lash out or get back at somebody in one way or another. And in your decision making composite, that can look at not giving them what they asked for or simply ignoring their questions altogether. Um, so when you're looking at how to control your impulses and make sure that you're making an informed decision, doing some of those steps when you recognize you're angry is try to ask yourself quickly, why am I angry? And the more you do these steps, the faster you'll become, and you'll be able to recognize your own triggers as to, oh, I'm getting very intense, I'm staring, deeply, or I'm looking away, I'm ignoring them, or maybe I'm sucking my teeth. Something gives away the fact that we're upset, and typically that's our alert system to whoever we're talking to let them know with that self expression that, hey, I'm upset, I don't necessarily want to talk to you, or I'm not in the mood. But recognizing that, and in turn, in the conversation, internally asking yourself, why am I truly frustrated? And then remembering to question, is it this person or is it something that happened previously? So you can then take that second to take a breath and say, I will come back to this later, or, give me a couple seconds to think about this. You can take those deep breaths. You can get yourself reacclimated to the situation. Make sure you're based in reality for what's truly being asked and what you can truly do. And then you can answer that question with the most informed decision making steps that you can. So it's not abrupt, sudden, and emotionally charged. With that, I guess I'll ask Kathysue, how does optimism affect self-regard, and self-actualization?
Thanks, Tyson. That's really an important question because if a person doesn't respect themselves, have any self confidence, or have the ability to strive toward their purpose in life, how can they possibly feel optimistic about their future? And over the last 12 years of working with trauma clients who suffer from PTSD, there was always the same common factors, which included low optimism, low self regard, and low self actualization scores on the EQI. And when I was able to help my clients turn their despair and hopelessness into optimism and hope for their future, their levels of self regard and self actualization would actually simultaneously increase. And it would be a slow pace, but they would still increase. And they would do so in a balanced way. And while I'm not saying it can't happen, I've just never experienced a trauma client who had high self regard, high self actualization, and low optimism scores. My research over the last 12 years has found that optimism works as a motivating factor toward increasing self regard and self actualization. A sense of hope, happiness, and positivity actually led to an increase in self worth, self confidence, and a renewed sense of life purpose. So all of these subscales, they all work together. They all need to be balanced together. But if you look at it, some of the subscales actually fuel the others, and you can fuel them negatively or positively. But optimism is really really important as an anchor to fuel all of them positively. And I know we're coming to the end. I'll stop there, send it back to Tyson, and just to see if there's any questions from our listeners.
Thank you, Kathysue. And it's looking like we do not have any questions. So with that, I guess we'll go ahead and I will close us out unless Cinzia, do you have any final remarks that you would like to make before I close it out here?
No, just to remind the audience that if they are interested to know more, they clearly can reach out to us offline. And just keep in mind that these subscales, the ones that we have seen through the 6 podcasts, are always interconnected. As Kathysue mentioned earlier, there is always this element of connection. So it's not very helpful for each of us to consider them separately. Just consider them in a wider context and scenario. So this is my final message.
Well, thank you to all of you who joined and supported us for our Leveraging Your Emotional Social Intelligence for Growth podcast. We have completed a high-level overview of the EQI 2.0 assessment and also delved deep into each of the 5 composite groups. Now it's time to discuss the practical application of emotional social intelligence in our daily lives and work. So we encourage you to take what you have learned from our discussions and apply it in your individual growth journey, creating a ripple effect on those you work with and interact with. And remember to always balance your emotions and strive for overall happiness and well-being. Have a good night and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.